This podcast is brought to you by CyberNut, the security awareness training solution designed for schools. Developed with insights from IT directors in education, CyberNut shields your school from online threats, data breaches, phishing, and more. Trusted by schools and built by industry experts, CyberNut empowers your staff and students to stay secure online. CyberNut, your trusted partner in safeguarding the future.
Welcome to the Zero Breach Zone, the ultimate podcast dedicated to safeguarding K-12 schools from cyber threats and beyond.
I'm Andy.
And I'm Phil, your co-host guiding you through the intersection of cybersecurity and education.
Each episode, Phil and I will dive into conversations that matter, breaking down the latest cybersecurity challenges that schools face.
And we're not doing it alone. We'll be bringing some experts in the field from the edtech world and beyond for interviews, getting their take on the most pressing issues.
Plus, every episode will wrap up with a recurring segment, The Parting Tool, where we'll share a top tip or tool that you can start using immediately to stay ahead of breaches, phishing, and everything in between.
So, welcome to the show. We're thrilled to have you here with us. Let's not just listen, but let's take some action. Connect with us on LinkedIn and other socials and join the conversation. Together, we can build a strong community dedicated to protecting our schools. Hello, welcome back to the Zero Breach Zone. I'm Phil and he's
Andy Lombardo.
Andy Lombardo. Good to see you again, Andy.
Good to see you, Phil.
It's been a little bit, but cybersecurity never quits, never stops 24/7. We got to be vigilant, and not only vigilant, but the cyber criminals are always vigilant as well. And that's the sad part of the truth. But you know what? I see a familiar face to me and to you, but may not be familiar to the rest of the world, rest of our audience. I want to welcome a special person by the name of Oliver Page. Andy, maybe you could fill in the blanks on who this Oliver Page is.
Well, if you are a devout listener to our show, you've heard the intro and us talk about CyberNut. And Oliver is the fellow that we have to thank for CyberNut. So I know that Phil, you and I have both known Oliver for a few months now. And he's the one that brought this unlikely duo together because we've never met in person. We've never broken bread together or anything. And so Oliver's kind of that piece that connects the two of us and brought us together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oliver is not just this friendly face that you see before you here, but he has done some amazing TED Talks I've seen, talking about his journey from probably high school, but I want to hear more about this in a second as I ask you, Oliver. Starting in high school, the earliest entrepreneur mindset, if we could call it that. And, you're always trying to solve problems and you do a great job of that. But tell us how you got started down this founding CyberNut, but also founding a couple of other companies along the way too.
Thanks for having me, Phil and Andy. Super excited to be here. And I'm really glad I introduced you guys a few months ago and that this whole podcast project has taken off. I'm really excited to be chatting with you both. And yeah, I'd be happy to share a little bit about my story as an entrepreneur and how I got started out of my bedroom when I was in high school. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started several businesses. 5 businesses to date. 3 of them have failed. 1 of them is doing well and growing. And now we have CyberNut, which is taking off like a rocket ship, I'm happy to say. But yeah, going back to 2011, 2012, I was a very creative high school student. Wasn't a great student, I have to admit, but I was always looking for new ideas, coming up with new inventions, coming up with new app ideas, because that was right when the iPhone just dropped. So I was in high school when the iPhone came out and immediately got obsessed with the App Store and coming up with fun ideas for apps, as did a lot of people back then and still do. But I started my first business called NutKase when I was in high school. And the inception for that business was really, I was very fortunate to have a family friend bring an iPad 1 from the United States to Italy about 9 months before it was released. And in Italy, of course, with the iPad not being officially available, there were no cases available for sale either. And this is like, early days of Amazon. I wasn't really buying anything on Amazon at the time. It was unknown in Italy. So it wasn't really easy to buy a case. And so I had this new iPad. I didn't have a case. And so I resorted to using a neoprene sleeve, which if any of you guys have used a neoprene sleeve, there isn't anything special about it in the slightest. And it didn't do a great job at protecting it. But more importantly, it wasn't an effective solution as a kickstand or to prop it up to use the keyboard function and so on and so forth. Anyhow, miraculously, we had another friend ship us over one of the original iPad cases for the iPad 1, but through, I don't know what you want to call it, divine intervention or some act of God, a volcanic eruption in Iceland took place in 2012. I don't know if you recall this Icelandic volcanic eruption. It was massive, and it created this dust storm that wiped out global air travel for a week. And so that iPad case that was getting sent over never made it. And like I said, act of divine intervention or something, that situation forced me to get even more creative and scratch my own itch, and essentially was the big push that made me start designing the very first iPad case that I invented. And the concept for that iPad case, I wish I should have had it on me, honestly, was a protective case that had a hand strap to make it easy to hold on to. And the reason I came up with that idea was because I almost dropped my iPad, obviously, because it's a very slippery device. And that was really the inception. That was where it all started. And I came up with this idea. My parents, being Americans, entrepreneurs who have been living in Italy for over 30 years, they thought it was a cool idea. So they were supporting me, and they loaned me some money to start making some prototypes in China. I found some factories on Alibaba, and we developed the very first prototype and eventually commercialized it and bought 500 cases. And I started selling them to friends and family and set up a small little e-commerce with Shopify back in the day. And that was really how the ball got rolling. But the big win was my elementary school had bought 100 iPads, and they were the very first big customer for us. So they bought 100 iPad cases when I was like 17 or 18. And that's what gave me the idea of, wait a sec, why don't I build the NutKase brand to be a education focused accessory brand rather than a consumer facing brand? And I think it was that decision that really set me on this course that I'm on now, way back in the day.
So when you're making that decision about the case being more of an education centric market, what were some of the things about education that made it a unique environment for you to want to try to pursue?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think clever idea at the time was, since it was still so early, it was only the beginning of those first iPad waves that, iPad deployments that were taking place. There were very limited options from a case perspective, unlike today, which I think when I last checked, there were about 15,000 vendors on Amazon selling iPad cases. But back then there were very few. And I think the unique thing about our product and positioning was, number one, I positioned it as a designed by students for students. And that was a clever little kind of play on words and a cute story that kind of resonated with schools. Yeah, if I'm going to buy cases for an iPad, I might as well buy it from a kid who actually, had the problem and saw the opportunity and built it himself rather than just some random other brand. And then the other feature was that hand strap concept. The hand strap was really, back in 2012, cutting edge, which I know today a hand strap is a dime a dozen on all these cases. But back then it was really cutting edge. And that functionality really was useful for teachers who are in constant motion in a school environment, and for students going in between classes. So that was really the differentiator for us at the time.
Oliver, back in 2012, we were just getting started with the iPad 2. When that just came out, it was, I believe it was April of 2012, somewhere maybe 2013. It's been a while. It's over a decade ago, but we were one of the first one-to-one iPad districts back then. And I remember looking for cases and what the challenge was back then. Because if we're going to put them in, and we were kindergarten through 8th grade or pre-K through 8th grade. And so we were going to put these in little kids' hands and expensive pieces of equipment. And so I knew we needed to protect them. What's funny is I think we chose a different case, probably one of the only cases Apple had available at the time, probably. But I remember a lot of our teachers going out and looking for other cases. And I know our teachers found the NutKase because, like you said, the hand strap, that was immediately what made it. We didn't want them to be the sage on the stage anymore, our teachers. We wanted to be, guide on the side. And so they were walking around their classrooms with their iPads, projecting their iPads if they could. I think that was an early time of AirPlay protocols, but I just remember those times. You used 2 words that I thought we should bring up a little bit more. You called yourself a serial entrepreneur, which I thought that was an interesting term. I've not really heard that around. I'm assuming that means you are constantly looking for problems to solve and constantly looking at ways to build another business or another branch or something like that. The second term that maybe you didn't say as much, but I want to focus on it a little bit is the idea of designing and creating and failing. I think that's a really important thing. I have a good friend that has written a book about how the importance of failure in education, of how that can, there's that acronym that's out there. First attempt in learning is what FAIL stands for. How did those 2 things come together where you failed, but you got back up on the horse and you kept going? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that failure is something that is unavoidable when you're starting a business.
When you're a serial entrepreneur.
Exactly. And in any walk of life, really, you can't expect to get it right out of the gate unless you are an absolute prodigy, unicorn type of person. I'm sure there's always the exception to the rule, but I think for most of us out there, failure is something that we need to learn to love and learn to embrace. Failure is the greatest teacher. I've rarely learned anything from things I've gotten right in life, but I've learned a lot from the things I've gotten wrong. And I feel like that's applicable to, anyone in any walk of life, whether you're working in IT, whether you're starting a business, whether you're in the classroom. I think the most important thing, though, is the response to failure. Are you one that can pick yourself up, learn, quickly iterate and change your approach so that you can immediately improve? Or are you one that gets knocked down and stays knocked down, complains, doesn't learn, makes this, worst of all, makes that same mistake again and again? But I think tying it back to entrepreneurship, failure is something that you can't avoid. I've started, like I said, 5 businesses, 3 were failures. 3 just didn't work out. We raised money, we launched, we tried to make it work, whether it was co-founder problems, whether it was product market fit problems. There really is no avoiding it. I think with NutKase, the benefit of NutKase is I got really lucky. I started working with my father and my cousin. And my cousin and father, Ross and Leo, they're now running NutKase and doing an exceptional job at it. I think that the benefit of working with family is family members know how to work together. There's this natural love and connection that allows you to put up with each other a little bit more than you would with someone who isn't your family member. It does have its drawbacks. But the reason I mention that is I had a lot of support. I got really lucky. So my family was very supportive in those early days when we ran into those roadblocks, when the manufacturing went wrong, when the marketing didn't work, when the conference we spent all that money on that was supposed to be really good didn't pan out. I had a lot of support, and that allowed me to bounce back from those failures much quicker than most, I think.
Wow. That's awesome. The positivity and the ability to pick up and then find other problems to solve. We have to tie this back to cybersecurity, and there's obviously a problem. Well, we've had a problem in our country for a while, and the problem is just getting worse with ransomware attacks and everything that's out there and targeting education. And so I love the fact that you have an education mindset, or at least you have a passion to help education, as evident with NutKase, but now with CyberNut. What was some of the precursors to that coming to your forefront and saying, hey, this is the next problem I need to solve?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I feel like for years, I had always had this itch of wanting to explore a project in cybersecurity. I'd been going to ed tech conferences, the ISTEs, the TCEAs, the iTechs of the world for over 10 years. And I'd always see a cybersecurity company there, positioned itself. And I always just had this feeling like I knew that cybersecurity was going to be obviously a massive industry. It was going to be solving huge problems that the world's going to be facing and was facing. And I always knew I just wanted to somehow participate. But it took me years and years before coming up with the idea for CyberNut. And I think the reason CyberNut came to be is because I was able to have conversations with CTOs and IT directors at conferences. That was really the precursor for CyberNut. I was at these conferences and I had this itch that I wanted to come up with some new business, some new idea. I knew I wanted to do something in cyber, but I didn't know what exactly. And what I ended up doing was interviewing and having conversations with CTOs and IT directors to really understand their pain points and their frustrations. And that combined with a conversation that I was having with a friend of a friend in Chicago, actually, who was a cybersecurity analyst. And we were having lunch and I was like, yeah, I've been thinking on cyber. I would love to be working on something in that space. And he actually happens to be a cybersecurity analyst for a firm based in Chicago. And I was like, yeah, are there any ideas or areas or angles in cyber that you think could be really appropriate for schools? And he was just like, have you thought about cybersecurity awareness training? And I was like, what's that? And it's the whole industry that's focused on training and helping people learn about phishing, helping them identify phishing attacks and so on and so forth. And I was like, no, I hadn't heard about that. And I went down the rabbit hole. I discovered that there were a lot of really big cybersecurity training players in the space. And most of those players were primarily built to cater to the enterprise market. They were catering to corporations and businesses and hospitals, but there weren't any designed specifically to cater to the needs of schools. And everyone I knew that was using these big enterprise security providers, they weren't thrilled. They weren't jumping for joy saying, this is the best software vendor. I love their product. They do an incredible job. They're fairly priced. They were really just at best mediocrely enthused by the providers. And that's really where my entrepreneurial DNA and hardwiring comes in. Because as soon as I start hearing a buyer talk about a product and not be that passionate or interested in it, that's when I start thinking about ways that I could perhaps do it better. And it was really through those conversations and through a very fast kind of iterative cycle of brainstorming that we came up with the idea for CyberNut and identified that there was an opportunity to build a security awareness training platform built exclusively for K-12, a solution that really lasers in and focuses entirely on helping faculty, staff, and students be able to identify phishing attacks and learn how to avoid them in the future. So that was really the inception of CyberNut, and that was just over a year and a half ago now, just about.
I remember when I first saw the product, I was like, wow, this is a unique approach to this problem that I think not only can I get my hands around, but I think my teachers are going to finally feel better about themselves to try to understand this, because their job, number one job, is teaching, right? They don't have time to be thinking about phishing and being attacked, but yet teaching today means teaching with digital tools, which means you're online, you have an online presence. And so there's a more likelihood that they're going to be targets, and seemingly easy targets. So the idea that all of a sudden there's a product that can help teachers not feel intimidated by cybersecurity, but actually feel empowered, that drew me right in. So I What about you, Andy? When you first saw the product?
Yeah, as someone who is one of those unenthusiastic users of one of the large enterprise security awareness platforms, when I was first being introduced to CyberNut, that was my initial reaction was, this is something that gets it on an education level. And so what are some of the features of CyberNut that you guys have used to kind of target in to make it that kind of accessibility level for students and staff, and so that it's not a punitive, oh, I clicked a phishing link, now I'm enrolled in this training that's going to be boring and I don't want to do, and I'll put it off till the last possible minute. What are some of the features and the architecture philosophy that you guys came up with?
Absolutely. I think the biggest ones for us were, we recognize, we really tried to put ourselves in the shoes of a teacher. We try to put ourselves in the shoes of a busy school district administrator who really doesn't have time to spend on long traditional kind of training compliance videos, which is currently the norm. The norm for phishing training is you're watching videos, you're taking quizzes, it's time consuming, it's frustrating, and it's boring. And it's the last thing you want to do is to spend your time doing that. So we really put ourselves in the shoes of the end user. And like I said, through the conversations with the IT directors and the CTOs that we worked with, we realized that one of the key pillars of our product is that it had to be fast. It had to be something that was fast and easy to do, and almost find a way to blend the training experience into the day-to-day lives of a user. And as you guys know, one of our primary design philosophies around the user experience is precisely that. A user doesn't have to actually go to a portal and log in and conduct their own training. A user only has to check their email, which is what they're doing every day, all the time anyway. And in the event they spot an email that looks suspicious, they can report it using our CyberNut reporting tool. And by doing so, if they do catch one of our phishing simulations, which is one of the fake phishing emails that we sent out as part of that training, we're going to actually reward the user and give them our form of currency, which are acorns. And so a user earns points, earns acorns by doing these little trainings. They're very fast to complete. And that's really how we've been able to innovate on the user experience, is we've been able to blend the training into the day-to-day life of a teacher, which reduces the need for them to just take a chunk of their time and do it all in one go. That being said, we are working on a new product, which I'm really excited about, which I haven't had a chance to bring you guys up to speed on entirely yet, but we do have a more traditional compliance product that's going to be coming out that does provide districts with the peace of mind that at least the bare minimum compliance training is completed for every single employee in a district. And that's for cyber insurance. A lot of districts have cyber insurance and they need to have a minimum checkbox requirement. And so that's something that we're providing as well. But the more innovative aspect of our product is absolutely on our AI-powered phishing engine and is doing a lot of these trainings on an ongoing and autonomous basis.
I got to say, when I saw some of the phishing emails that you guys put together and how authentic they looked, like even one of them was an Apple one and it was using the same Apple fonts and everything, which I'm sure that's where the AI comes in and makes it look as authentic as possible with just fine details. And of course, you train how to look for those fine little details, like a dash when there shouldn't be a dash in an email address or something like that.
Exactly.
Weird little things like that, but you train and you pick up on that. I love that part of it when a teacher is able to see, hey, you missed this one, and here's why you missed it. And here's where you missed it. And here's some things to be, conscious of as you're looking through emails. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is, and little things like that. But the authenticity, I think, is something different than I've seen from other products out there, which I think makes it more real, but also helps our teachers to fine tune their eye. And I'm excited that there's also the possibility with students. That's the next step. I want to train our students on how to recognize that early on and get that early as part of their digital citizenship training. So maybe you
Well,
want to talk a little bit
turning
about
the
that.
question around to you guys from a student perspective, where do you see cybersecurity training entering the lives of students? Because I think that's an area that we are building in and we are innovating on. But I'm curious from your perspective, before CyberNut was in the market, how were you guys thinking about training for students? Was this something that was even on your radars? Or, yeah, I'd be curious to understand.
Yeah. And so one of the things that's interesting is in our position, at least for where I'm at, a lot of what we do with cybersecurity for students is more about us putting up guardrails
Yeah.
to protect instead of training them to protect themselves. And the lion's share of our effort is on, for email, for example, all of our students are on a closed campus email system, so they can't receive external emails. And instead of training to how to identify phishing emails, we just say you're not going to get any phishing emails. And now there are ways around that, but that's been the philosophy in general. So we're at a point now where I think the district I'm in, we've been one-to-one for a little bit over 10 years now. And so it's starting to shift that philosophy of, okay, we've done digital citizenship the same way for a long time. We've done device management for a long time. We've done security awareness the same for a long time. And the shift that's different now than 10 years ago is really that focus on where are the places to embed that cybersecurity training for students. Because as we've gone through our one-to-one journey, technology and devices have become much more embedded in curriculum and part of pedagogy. And so in our district anyway, we don't have dedicated instructional coaches or people training people on how to use the technology because it's become so firmly embedded that we look at it as just, it's a teacher tool and teachers are going to use and manage and use their best judgment. But, we're in that world where we need to prepare kids for when they go to college, they're not going to have a closed campus email system or on their personal emails. And so they're still susceptible to those same kind of things, just not through a school account. It's a really interesting point in history and time to be having a product that's geared towards students, because I know there are going to be conversations about student security awareness training, student MFA, all those kinds of things over the next few years. So we're definitely good timing.
It is definitely good timing. I will say as I go to put my special hat on there, gentlemen, I don't know, do you have your hats? Because it's been a tough nut to crack, if you will, but you're doing a great job cracking the nut, and the nut of cybersecurity, the nut of education, the nut of both digital citizenship education and cybersecurity education. You're combining those, and I can't wait to see. You talked about iteration, the future iterations of CyberNut, and where the squirrel's going to go next. I don't know if you want to give us any clues on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting updates coming in the next couple months. The team's been expanding. We've got a very exciting product roadmap. CyberNut in its infancy was really just a phishing simulation training platform, but we really are expanding into a lot of other directions. I think the student product that you guys mentioned is going to be a really important part of the longevity of our platform and of our business. To your point, Andy, we've had some schools, despite having emails locked down for students, we've had a number of customers and or districts that we work with tell us that their faculty members have been compromised in a phishing email. The bad actors take over a trusted faculty member's email and then use that email to phish all of the students because they have the permissions to. Teachers can obviously email student email accounts. And so in this one circumstance, one of our school districts had, thousands of students receive a phishing email from a trusted teacher. The students clicked on the link and it was for like this yard sale where they were like selling an old PlayStation 4, and a bunch of kids, they made payments through PayPal because they had the access to their parents' PayPal accounts, and they made transfers. And now the schools here, like, who's going to hold the bag on this one? But it's just one of many examples of how students are still vulnerable to phishing attacks, despite them having emails that are severely restricted from the outside world. And to Andy's point, again, the importance of teaching kids how to identify these emails from a young age, I think it's going to be as important as learning how to read or write. Being able to identify deep fake content online, fake news, phishing emails in your inbox, being able to identify a robo AI voice when someone calls your cell phone in the future. These things, they sound futuristic still, but they're coming.
right
and
now,
I
yep.
think that there's really there's an importance that needs to be focused on the student learning for cybersecurity, especially. So that's really where CyberNut's going, is we're really innovating on the student front, but the faculty and staff are, of course, super top of mind for us as well, because we know that the faculty and staff are the users that could really cause a very serious risk and data breach for the school itself. So we're very focused on training both.
That training is so necessary, more soon than later, as we get, like you said, the deep fakes and the AI impersonations and things. Thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate the time and hearing what entrepreneurial mindset is and how that looks and how that works. And I'm sure we'll try to have you on again to talk a little bit more, maybe when you're advancing some of the other
Absolutely.
products. But,
yeah, I would love that. I would love to see if this could be like maybe like an entrepreneurial reoccurring episode once every now and then.
Sounds like a really good idea.
There's a lot happening with CyberNut, and I think there's a lot of exciting stories to tell as well that we can share with the community.
Very
Absolutely.
good. Andy, one thing we always like to leave our audience with as we close out today's episode is a parting tip or tool. Do you have something for us today?
Yeah. On the spirit of phishing emails, one tool that we use pretty frequently is a site called urlscan.io. And urlscan.io is just a site where you can go and put in a website address, and it will take a screenshot of the website and give you that picture of the site, so you don't have to actually go to it. Same thing if you have bit.ly links, it will unshorten the bit.ly links and show you where it's actually going to. And then there's also some reputation things attached to it. So you can see if other people have been reporting that same site, if it's been flagged as malicious, if it's talking to malicious sites, and all those kinds of things. So lots of visibility, free site, real quick and easy to use.
Well, thank you, Andy. That's awesome. Audience, I hope we enjoyed our time together with Oliver Page, CEO and founder of CyberNut, and several other companies too, NutKase out there. We'd love to have you back. And
Thanks,
like
guys.
you said, thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. I'm really excited to be on the show, and looking forward to the next episode already.
Thank you for helping us to create the ever elusive zero breach zone. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Zero Breach Zone podcast. We hope our conversation left you feeling more informed and empowered to protect our K-12 schools from cyber threats.
A big shout out to our sponsor, CyberNut AI, for making this podcast possible. CyberNut is committed to providing security awareness training designed for schools, helping educators and students navigate the digital world with confidence.
If you want to learn more about how CyberNut can help strengthen your school's cybersecurity defenses, head over to their website, cybernut.com, and sign up for their training program. Together, we can create a safer online environment for everyone in our educational communities.
And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Connect with us on LinkedIn to join the conversation and help us build a strong community around cybersecurity and education.
Join us next time on the Zero Breach Zone for more insightful conversations. Stay vigilant, stay ahead, and let's keep our schools a
Zero
breach
zone.